Estuary. Oh, thanks, Sarah. I'll start again. I'm Tom Ardito from Restore America's Estuaries. Sarah Smith is here, our grant administrator from Restore America's Estuaries. And welcome everybody to our webinar for the SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants, or SWIG 2024 application webinar. So I'm just going to kind of scan down through the names here a little bit. Looks like we've got some old friends and some new friends. So that's great. So what I'll do is try to gear this gear this overview toward people who may be completely unfamiliar with our program. Forgive us if you're an old hand at this, but there will be some new things for you too, because we have a few program changes this year. And we'll leave ample time for questions at the end of the session. So, if something is in need of immediate clarification, put your hand up and I'll try to address that. But generally speaking, let's wait till the end of the overview, and then we'll again devote as much time as you need to answering questions. And I'm probably the person to answer most programmatic questions, and then if anything comes up that's of an administrative nature, if Sarah's still on the call, I'm sure she'd be happy to address that as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back to screen share here if I can figure out how to do that. And here we go. So again, this webinar is to discuss applications for the 2024 SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants, which we fondly call SWIG. For those of you in Rhode Island, by the way, I was just telling somebody, this is a photograph of the Kickamuit River Dam removal that we funded along with many other funders. This is underway right now. So if you have a chance to get up to Warren, Rhode Island on Child Street, take a look at this. It's pretty cool. This photograph shows a couple of excavators hammering away at the old spillway. This is right at the head of tide in Warren, Rhode Island. Restore America's Estuaries is our organization. We're a national nonprofit. We're actually a partnership of a number of nonprofits, smaller nonprofits, including, or I should say local nonprofits, not necessarily smaller, including Save the Bay here in Providence, Rhode Island. And since 2017, we've partnered with EPA Region 1 to manage this program, SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants. And it's one of several similar programs around the country that we work with EPA and other agencies like NOAA to manage. The SNEP program itself has been in existence since 2014 when it was created by Congress. And the program vision is a resilient ecosystem of safe and healthy waters, thriving watersheds and natural lands, and sustainable communities in the Southeast New England coastal watershed region. So I think of those as kind of the three pillars of our program: healthy ecosystems, clean water, and sustainable communities. And everything we fund supports that strategic plan, which you can find if you go to snepgrants.org, which is our website, and you'll be hearing more about that. You can link over to EPA's SNEP strategic plan from there, or you can just, if you just Google on EPA SNEP program, you'll find EPA's website. So you can think of it as the SNEP program as kind of an umbrella program with several elements under it, one of which is the SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants that we're talking about today. This is our funding region. It's basically all the watersheds that drain into the coastal waters from the Rhode Island-Connecticut border to the eastern end of Cape Cod. So you can see it includes all of the Narragansett Bay watershed, which goes all the way up to Worcester and Brockton, Mass. It includes and that includes the Taunton River watershed, by the way. So that's, the majority of our land area. It includes all of the Buzzards Bay watershed, as you can see. It includes the south-facing watersheds of Cape Cod, but not all of Cape Cod. So if you have a project in Provincetown, for example, that would be outside of our funding region. It includes all the offshore islands within this region. So that's Block Island, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and the Elizabeth Islands, and the islands of Narragansett Bay being the largest among those. Oh, and it includes the southwest corner of Rhode Island, which uh, drains to the Pawcatuck River and Little Narragansett Bay, for those of you who are familiar with that area. We've managed this program, Ray has managed this program since 2018. In that time, we've actually entered the cooperative agreement in 2017, but the first grant round was 2018. So we've done 5 grant rounds so far. And over that time, we've awarded over 70 grants, 73 grants, actually. At least 150 grantees, because most of these are partnership projects, as you'll hear, probably closer to 200, I imagine. And over that time, we've awarded about $15 million in grants, with the match bringing that up to about $23 million in total projects that we've funded. And our grants range from 10,000 to 500,000, most of which are in the $100,000 to $400,000 range. And again, if you go to our website, snepgrants.org, you can click on any program year and link to all the grants that we made under that program year. So that's if you're new to the program, that's a really good good way to get an idea of what we fund. And for the older grants that have final reports, the ones that have been completed, you can access the final reports and learn more about the projects that way. Our application process is a 2-step process, and we do this intentionally to make the program as accessible as possible. So the first step is a letter of intent, and we'll be talking more about that today, because that's the step that's open right now for applications. It's a really easy online form. If you know what you're doing if you already have your project formulated, you can easily complete the letter of intent in less than an hour. We review the letter of intent, all the letters of intent, and then we'll invite full proposals from those which we think are likely, have a better fit our funding goals. And the letters of intent are online only through a portal that's accessible from our snepgrants.org webpage. Also on that webpage, you'll find the request for proposals, which is the full specifications document, if you will, for the grants and the applications, and some supplemental materials, which for purposes of the pre-proposal or letter of intent, I'm pretty sure the only supplemental item you need is a budget template. Once it gets to the full proposal, there's a few others. We recommend that you review all those materials, particularly the RFP, prior to beginning the application. We have a brand new grant portal this year that Sarah built out. It's really great. I think you'll find it very easy to use. Every year we get a little stricter about the word counts, so you have to be succinct, and that's, believe me, but to both your advantage and ours. The portal doesn't autosave when you're in the middle of it, so there are reminders for you to save as you go along. But you can save your application, log out, and log back in to the account. You'll have to create an account to apply. And if you've applied in the past, you need a new account because it's a uh, new grants management system. But you can, save your application, go back to it. You can have multiple applications in process. If you wanted, you could be working on several. You could apply to several. We don't limit the number of applications you can submit. Or you could have a couple of applications and delete one and, submit the other, that kind of thing. And if you have problems with the system, just contact me and we'll help you through it. This year we have about $2.8 million available, which is not far off from what we had last year. Again, the overall goal is to restore ecosystems and improve communities and foster sustainable communities. These funding themes are kind of, you could think of them as kind of the buckets that we look at. They're pretty comprehensive. We're interested in small cities and urban environments. Under that, I would say, the environmental justice and equity bullet, falls under that a lot of the time. Conserving and restoring rural and natural landscapes, innovations to improve water quality, environmental change, climate change, that sort of thing. Addressing those changes on the landscape and on the shoreline and in the water. We are always interested in local and regional partnerships. We strongly encourage you, regardless of the project you're working on, to partner with organizations that may be mutually supportive of your goals. And regional learning is an important part of the SNEP program. The idea being that whatever you do, we hope you'll find ways to communicate that so that it can be so your experience can be used by others throughout the SNEP region. We are a very diverse program, and it's probably I think of as one of the real strengths of this program is that we can fund almost anything under those three pillars of clean water, healthy ecosystems, sustainable communities. But more specifically, the kinds of projects that we fund are larger scale estuarine restoration projects, multi-community kind of things. We fund a lot of green streets and green neighborhoods, urban projects, urban parks, urban shorelines. And these projects, and urban stormwater too. And these projects often are environmental justice projects. They may have elements of job training. They almost always have elements of community engagement. We fund a lot of stormwater projects, as it says here, demonstration projects and training, as well as sort of planning and implementation of, for example, community-wide stormwater projects or watershed-wide stormwater efforts. We fund, straight-on habitat restoration. That includes salt marshes, inland wetlands, river restoration, dam removal, culvert replacement, floodplain restoration, that kind of thing, dune habitat, coastal habitat, seagrass. And we fund coastal resilience projects, shoreline restoration, and obviously there's a lot of overlap between all of these. So we very much encourage holistic projects with multiple benefits. So it's not uncommon for us to fund a project that may hit three or even six of these bullets. Pilot scale projects, particularly for sort of innovative technologies like permeable reactive barriers, bioreactors, innovative septic. I'm going to interrupt myself for a moment here because we always get questions about this. We will not fund, private septic installations, and there's a little bit more about that in the RFP. But typically, if we're funding something related to septic, it's because it's a pilot effort, and typically it will be in a public application. Watershed and regional plans, water quality plans, that sort of thing. Um, we've funded some marine debris and solid waste projects. It's not kind of the majority of our funding, but where they're innovative and important and impactful, we'll fund those. And we have a category of smaller grants that can be used for conferences and technology transfer, that kind of thing. And we really strongly encourage you, if you have ideas for regional conferences, that kind of thing, to come to us and um, and apply. Just about any organization that's not either private or federal is eligible for these grants. So we fund a lot of municipalities, state agencies, some tribal organizations, uh, many nonprofits, regional planning organizations, any kind of academic institution is eligible. And again, we strongly encourage partnerships. So it's very common for us to fund a project that maybe a municipality is a grant recipient, but they're working with a nonprofit, or a nonprofit is a grant recipient and they're working with a municipality, or we'll fund projects that are multi-municipality with one typically uh, as our recipient, and then other subrecipients on the grant, the other municipalities being the other subrecipients, and pretty much any permutation of partnership that you can imagine will fund. Here's the award calendar for this year, or I should say, it's more sort of the grant cycle calendar. Um, today's March 6th, so we're in the pre-application workshop. Our RFP is open. We're open for applications. The SNEP network, I'll talk about them a little in a moment. They're kind of a sister program of ours, focusing on technical assistance. They're hosting two funding workshops, one for Rhode Island, one for Massachusetts, on March 13th and 14th. We'll be participating in that. For our purposes, there's no difference. Our program, whether you're in Rhode Island or Southeast Massachusetts, our program's the same, but they're doing two different workshops because of other funding programs that may be specific to one town or the other, one state or the other. Um, the letter of intent, the pre-application, closes on April 5th at 4 p.m. So that's the next deadline of significance for this program. And by the beginning of May, we'll let you know whether or not you've been selected for whether we're requesting a full proposal or not. And then that full proposal will be due on June 21st. And then in July, we'll notify um, the awardees, the selectees at that point, really. We'll work in August with you to develop a grant agreement. And then once that grant agreement is signed, typically end of August, beginning of September, something like that, you can begin work on your project. And then we'll have a couple of award events to announce the awards in typically September or October, but it kind of depends on congressional schedules, because we invite congressional members in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and we have to work with their schedules. So either way, in the fall, we'll announce the grants publicly. And so typically, what we ask is that the grantees, let their partners know, let their boards, whoever needs to know about the award in order to begin work on the project, you can notify. But we ask that you not um, do any press releases or anything like that until the members of Congress have the opportunity to announce the awards in Rhode Island and Massachusetts at whatever date we were able to schedule for that. So here are just some pieces of advice to you, the things we look for that make a proposal successful. And let me interrupt myself here to say that these grants are relatively competitive. So typically, last year, just off the top of my head, we had about $3 million for grants. I think we received something around $10 million in letter of intent requests. Of those, we requested full proposals totaling about $6 million, and of those, we awarded about $3 million. So it's not nearly as competitive as some other grant programs and some national programs. But having said that, it's competitive enough that um, we're never scraping the bottom of the barrel to find projects to fund. So in order to be funded, it has to be a pretty strong proposal. Um, the first bullet really refers to that strategic plan, that SNEP strategic plan. So, it's very broad, but the request should be in the context of the regional vision and goals of the SNEP strategic plan. We're looking for significant positive impact on ecosystems and communities. I mean, that may seem obvious, but um, what that really means is we're looking for projects that are not just plans and studies, but projects that are really going to make a difference ultimately. Maybe not within the period of the grant, and maybe well after the grant project itself is done. For example, you may be requesting funding for um, planning and permitting on a particular project. So it's not until later when construction happens that the actual impact will occur. But ultimately, we're looking for a significant positive impact. Um, you know, I think nearly all the projects that we fund have, I would go so far as to say all the projects that we fund have some connection to water quality and Clean Water Act goals. But again, since we're supportive of holistic projects, that may be an indirect connection to water quality. Um, but you should think about it and think about what that connection is. Again, we're very, um, strongly supportive of local and regional partnerships and anything that either creates those or sustains those. Local and regional capacity that can really take any form from a nuts and bolts kind of thing where you're creating a new group to work on a local problem, maybe a stormwater, something like that, to more knowledge based capacity. So it may be something where your project is going to set it, be a model or an example for a particular way of addressing a problem that's common throughout the region, and building regional capacity in that way. Um, so I guess that overlaps with the next bullet, the regional learning and expertise. And we really look for a strong outreach component in all the projects that we fund. But that outreach component, depending on the nature of the project, it may be a more general audience, it may be stakeholders, or it may be a technical audience. If you're doing something that's really esoteric, it may not be something that, the outreach could be, for example, the academic community might be your audience. And in that way, we encourage you to kind of understand the community in which you're working and the audience for your project, both in terms of who's going to benefit and who's going to be interested in it, in an outreach sense. I mean, we always get a few requests every year from you know some organization in Colorado that has some great idea for something they want to do, and they're kind of um, I'm using Colorado as an example, but pick your state outside of the region. That they have some technology or something they want to implement, and they're hoping to implement it here in the region, and don't really have any local partners or um, uh, local, haven't, really established a regional demand for whatever technology they're interested in trying. And I always say to them, look, you need to establish some partnerships in the region if you want to compete for this grant, because that's what it's really all about. Is um, we will fund an organization outside of the region that's working in the region, but we're going to look for those local partnerships and for um, projects that really understand the needs of the region and the communities within the region. And to the last bullet, which touches on something I said before, um, that have a sense of ultimate implementation in the real world. Um, you may have an idea for like a really fantastic mapping project. We get these all the time. Um, but unless you understand how that mapping project is ultimately going to translate into improved management um, in the region, or at least have an idea and a commitment to make that happen, it's probably not going to be very competitive in our program. So this foundations thing, or slide, I should say, um, these are things that I would say, um, every or nearly every application, uh, will need to address most of these bullets in order to be um, competitive. So again, identifying the needs of the region. Your proposal should address or the region, or on any scale. So either regional, local, community, whatever. But your proposal is addressing real needs. Um, Regional or watershed plans, where there is a regional or a watershed plan that affects the work that you're doing, you should, you know, at the very least be aware of that or tie into it where you can. I mean, we recognize that sometimes an existing plan may be out of date or irrelevant, something like that. But um, the folks we have kind of a large review committee. We have over 20 people on our grant review committee, and they're super knowledgeable about the SNEP region. And they're experts in all different things. So some are water quality people, some are wildlife people. Um, some like me are jacks of all trade, masters of none. But but if there is kind of a glaring omission, um, people will pick up on it and they'll say, well, why is this proposal proposing to address stormwater in this area when there's this plan that was developed a few years ago to do just that. So you should try to be aware of whatever plans are out there that you can tap into and take advantage of, recognizing that if it's not relevant to your project, then we understand that too. Similarly, the same goes for municipal vulnerability plans and that kind of thing. And again, we're really strongly encouraged that all our applications be partnerships of one kind or another. We look for a commitment from the community. Um, I've often seen applications that, um, a nonprofit may have a great idea for work uh, on say that affects municipal property, but the municipality is nowhere to be seen in the application. That's kind of a red flag, and vice versa. Um, Again, that stakeholder engagement is, another way of saying outreach. We really look for that. And all our projects, or all our proposals, I should say, require 33% non-federal match. I'll address that a little bit down the line, but we are very flexible in what that match can be. So it can be staff time, it can be, uh, you know, other sources of cash, obviously, um, and those are outlined in the RFP. Things you want to avoid. I mean, I think I've covered these in the prior discussion, um, with the possible exception of the last bullet, which, there are times we'll get two proposals to do very similar work, um, in the same town sometimes, or, within a very small geographic area. And, we'll usually in those cases, um, in as a result of the letter of intent review, we'll usually suggest um, that those folks get together and combine their proposals. Sometimes they don't, for whatever reason, they don't want to do that, and you know, it's very unlikely that we would fund two very similar projects, side by side, because we have a fairly big geographic area. We don't have enough funding to go around, and so one of the goals of this program is geographic uh, diversity of the projects that we fund, both on a within any one year and almost more importantly on a multi-year basis. These are, just, again, I've covered a few of these things, but things you should probably know about, just in terms of operationalizing a grant. Um, as I've said, there's a lot more in the RFP than I can cover here, so it's, really worth your while to read that. The grants are reimbursable. You incur the costs and then we reimburse them. 33% non-federal match, as I mentioned. Up to 2-year grants. You can certainly, we don't have a problem with shorter grants, but that's the maximum typically. Uh, Reports are required twice a year. Uh, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, EPA requires quality assurance performance plans, or QAPs, for any project that creates or utilizes environmental data. So that's the vast majority of the projects we fund. I think the exceptions are if you're doing a conference or something that's totally outreach related, or something that is, not using any environmental data, then it wouldn't require a QAP. But typically we require these QAPs, and uh, typically, we encourage the grantees to do them at the very beginning of the project. We do have a contractor, VHB, for those of you who are familiar with that consulting company. They're really great, and they won't write your QAP for you, but they'll provide technical assistance in terms of scoping out the QAP, in terms of, we ask that you submit the QAPs to VHB for like a pre-review before they go to EPA for approval. And they're very, very helpful. So we'll certainly give you support in the QAP process. But generally speaking, if you haven't um, done a QAP before, then you should just include money in your budget to hire somebody to do it. And that will just make things go a lot better. Or if you have a contractor, particularly if it's like an engineering contractor in your project already, just add some funding to that. Talk to them about, most engineering firms will be familiar with this requirement. So just talk to them about it, add it into the budget, and write it into your budget, and that way you're covered. You can have them do it first thing, get it out of the way, and then you get on with the rest of your project. Um, the funds, as I've said, are federal, and there are, various federal funding requirements, everything from competition requirements to, limitations on use of the funding. I mean, generally speaking, for the kinds of projects that come to us for funding, restoration projects, we can fund any phase of the project. So we can fund planning, we can fund permitting, we can fund um, construction, we can fund post-construction activities, we can fund, as I said, outreach, but there are limitations. Um, for example, we can't fund, for whatever reason, we can't fund social surveys. So if, so there's, these sort of odd federal requirements that are all spelled out in our RFP. And this last bullet refers to the fact that if you submit an application to us and we don't select it for funding, um, you know, you can certainly keep working on your project. And if you haven't received funding uh, next year, then come back to us next year. And there's many instances where we funded projects that were not successful the first try, but received funding on the second or even the third try. And that's really about all I have for today. We do have a lot of resources on our website, and I would encourage you to spend some time there. SNEPgrants.org, you should be able to either access or link to everything that you need for this application. Um, there's an overview of the program, not all that different from what you've gotten today. The request for proposals, the supplemental docs, the link to the application portal. The past and current grants, I mentioned this before, but I really encourage you, if you're thinking about submitting a proposal and you're not that familiar with the program, to look at the kind of things that we fund. And again, you can get to those by linking to the grant year. And then, as I said, all the cost requirements, competition requirements, QAPs, all that stuff. One of our sister programs is the Long Island Sound Community Impact Fund, and you can link to them from Restore America's Estuaries website as well. The URL is right here. And they have some videos on applying and that sort of thing. It's a different program than ours, but the requirements are very similar. So if you've never applied for a federal grant, or particularly if you're unfamiliar with federal grants, they have some really good resources on their site. And you can always contact us. Just contact me directly if you need information, and I'll be glad to provide whatever I can. I mentioned the SNEP network. It's kind of a sister program, and if you think of us as providing funding to implement the SNEP strategic plan, you can think of the network as providing technical assistance to implement the SNEP strategic plan and the program goals and vision. And they do a lot of different things that you can find on their website. But for purposes of this program, it's often useful to coordinate their resources with ours. So they can provide assistance in developing a project. They can't write a grant for you, but they can provide assistance in developing a project, which you can then submit a grant to SNEP Watershed Grants, or vice versa. We've often had projects that are delivering technical assistance that we've funded, then partner with the SNEP network to help in that technical assistance work. And you can contact them directly. Just go to their website, snepnetwork.org, and there's information there. And that's about it. So for me, here's my email. Here's our website, and here's information for getting to EPA's SNEP strategic plan. And you can, again, I'll be happy to provide any more information that you need. So let me unshare my screen. I see some questions in the chat, and we'll take it from there. Okay, now I got to find the chat here. Here we go. Okay. Katie DeGush at DM Remind us the date, year the program activities must be completed by if it's a multi-year project. Okay, so um, for this year, the awards, typically those grant agreements will be signed late in 24. Basically the work of the grant will be end of 25 and end of 2026 would be when the work of the grant would need to be completed, and then you'll have a little time after that to get your reporting together. Brian Keeley has, are there previous year proposals available as examples of strong applications? No, we don't make prior applications available, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. But certainly, if you uh, look at the prior projects, that'll give you an idea. And the other thing I would say is in the RFP, we um, provide the review criteria for the applications. So, um, and this year, one of the changes we made this year was to make sure that the application questions are very well aligned with the review criteria. So if you look at those criteria, it'll give you a really good idea of how we're evaluating the applications. Dennis Bowman, can project work start this summer and be reimbursed later in the fall if a grant is awarded? Yes. We allow for pre-award costs up to 60 days prior to the date of the award. So, um, so let's say if the grant agreement is signed on um, well, let's say everything goes well, the grant agreement is signed on September 1st, then 60 days prior to that would be in early um, June, I think. No, early July. So work beginning in early July would be eligible. Again, as Dennis points out here, it's that would only be the case if the grant were awarded and if those pre-award costs were in the budget um, that was approved. But and that this is all spelled out in a little more detail in the RFP. But yeah, we do allow that, and the same is true for match, that we can that a grantee can utilize match within that funding period of the grant, which may include which may be pre-award. Similar question. Do you have example? This is from Diana Landau. Do you have examples of an LOI you can share, formatting you prefer, e.g. narrow bullets or both, max length? Thanks. All that is spelled out in the both in the RFP and on the actual application portal, where it'll give you the word counts. It'll tell you if you have too many words. I think um, the uh, the portal is not going to allow any like really fancy formatting. Basically it's going to be text. I think you can put in bullets though. So you're going to be very limited in the amount of space that you have to answer these questions, and we do that because we find that the the shorter the answers, it's just to everybody's benefit to force us all to be concise and to answer the question that's asked, and not allow for kind of really long rambling narratives that end up not answering the questions that we need to be answered in order to evaluate a grant. So um, I think you'll find the application is really easy and really self-explanatory. And Stephanie asks if there's a maximum number of proposals that can be submitted. No. Um, I mean, I don't think we've ever had anybody submit more than two or three. I suppose if somebody submitted 20, we'd have to put a limit on it, but I don't foresee that happening. Here's another question. Our town/project sits on the Connecticut side of the Pawcatuck River. Are we eligible to apply, or do we need to be within the Rhode Island and Massachusetts area? Our project encompasses restoring habitats, water quality, removing invasive, and providing non-motorized public access. So what I would encourage you to do is to go to our website. You can link to an interactive map of the um, SNEP region on EPA's website. The map I just showed you is a static map, but or you can just go to SNEP's EPA's SNEP website, link to the interactive map, and you can zoom right into your project area and see how um, the funding boundary, if you will, um, aligns with your project. Um, I think the language that we use is that the impacts of the project have to be primarily, because we do get into kind of cross-boundary projects sometimes, but the impacts have to be primarily within the SNEP region. So if if the fundable if our funding region is downstream of your project and you can show a significant benefit in the SNEP um, within the SNEP region, then I think your project would be eligible. But it all depends on exactly where it falls relative to um, those boundaries that were established by EPA and Congress, and more importantly, where the benefits fall relative to those boundaries. Oh, here's a good question. What are the biggest mistakes you see in otherwise strong LOIs? I mean, I would go back to those bullets that I showed. And by the way, I should have mentioned this up front, but we're recording this presentation, so we'll post it to our website. It might take us a couple days to get it there, but you'll be able to review it there. Um, I think the very biggest one is that business of not having really thought through implementation. And, this is not an issue for a construction project, obviously. If you're coming to us for construction funding for dam removal, then that's implementation. And, you know, it's obvious how implementation is going to happen. But with earlier stage projects, whether they're planning, design, permitting, um, you know, I'll give you an example. You might be asking for funding for a sediment study in a river. And we look at that and say, okay, well, this is upstream of a dam, I'm saying. And and the obvious question is, okay, well, how is that sediment study going to be used in management decisions upstream or downstream? Is it, if are you going to use it? Is it a pre-screening study? Is it something that is going to be used in a scour, a sediment transport model? And if so, how does that sediment transport model, relate to management decisions that are going to be made downstream? So, in that case, it would be kind of a project or a proposal that's kind of appears to be kind of out of order with decision making um, in that river reach. Or another example that we see a lot would be, um, we'll see proposals for, let's say, a flood impact model or a coastal inundation model, and the question is, there are already flood inundation models all over the place. So the question is, how is this model going to improve upon the information that's already available? Who's going to use it? And why can't they just use the existing inundation models that are already there? And I mean, there have been times we've funded coastal models, but it was where the applicant made a really good case. I mean, the most obvious one was up on Pleasant Bay on Cape Cod, where um, they had a circulation model for Pleasant Bay that they were using for um, water quality management, and then a new breachway formed. And so obviously a new model needed to be done because the circulation in Pleasant Bay was no longer what it had been in the past with a new breachway. But there are other cases where it's really not clear why the existing um, models, whether inundation models or circulation models or whatever they happen to be, can't be used for whatever management needs to be done. So I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. Let me see if there's any hands up. Let me give it a minute in case anybody would like to put anything else into the chat, or if I don't think I've missed anything here. Here we go. One more question coming. Stephanie, would you like to just turn on your mic and just
Sure, as I'm typing. So
okay.
there you go. Would you consider for the social science surveying, which I know we can't do,
Yeah.
but if you're working with a set area, like a neighborhood association, on a pilot project to improve, water quality in their neighborhood, and you're talking with them throughout that period about their actions they're taking personally on their properties, would that be considered social science surveying, or would that not be considered social science surveying?
I don't think so. I mean, we
Okay.
can, if you want to get, I guess what I would say is uh, put into the proposal what you think you need to do, and we'll run it by EPA, and we can. I mean, certainly, community engagement is something we encourage, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so I would think of it that way. Put it in the proposal, and then we'll run it by EPA and make sure, if there's if it's in a gray area, we'll run it by EPA and make sure we give you some feedback so you can structure it in a way that is allowable.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And looks like that's it. I'll give everybody just a minute more to, just turn on your mic and jump in if you uh, have another question. Okay, seeing none and hearing none, I'll say thank you all for your time. I really, look forward to the proposals this year and encourage you to um, noodle around our website, contact me with any further questions that you have. And again, we'll get this recording up on the website within a couple of days. Thanks so much and have a great